Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bring Back Focus, a podcast where we discuss focus, attention management, and how all of that impacts personal and professional growth. Today, on the episode, we have a very special guest, Tom Alemo. Tom is an account executive at Gong, but apart from being an account executive, he has his podcast, he has his YouTube channel, he's written an ebook, he's done a lot of things. So, without further ado, Tom, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. This is a great, great intro. Excited to be here and talking about focus and attention management, productivity, all things that are topics that are close to my heart. So I'm excited to get into it.
Thanks, Tom. And Tom, in this podcast, we focus very heavily on focus because this is personally me, but I believe productivity is kind of an outcome, but focus is the journey to get there. And we'll focus on how do you prioritize, how do you focus, how do you keep your track on things that matter to you. And what really interested me when I looked at your profile was you are a full-time account executive, and I'm in sales. I know how tiring or how that job can really drain you, and it does take a lot of toll, not just physical, mental, all of that. But along with being a full-time account executive, you've also managed to release a podcast, managed to have a podcast, which now I believe has 272 episodes. That's crazy, right? And you have all of these things going. So that really interested me. So, before we dig deeper into it, just wanted to understand your journey, uh, how you came where you came, and yeah, just feel free to give your background and anything that you'd like to share.
Yeah. So maybe I can just give you a quick kind of cliff notes here of how everything got started. So yeah, I've been in sales for about 6 or 7 years now after college. Started selling, cut code knives in college. That's kind of how I got into this world. And while I was at my first sales job, I was living with one of my best friends at the time who's also in sales. And we knew we wanted to, kind of make a name for ourselves, so to speak. We wanted to build our brand. We wanted to, network with people. We wanted to learn. And I was shooting cold emails to CEOs all the time and VPs of sales, like, "Hey, can I pick your brain over coffee?" And no one would ever respond. And so we decided, hey, we like listening to different podcasts. Like, Tim Ferriss at the time was probably our favorite. And so we're like, oh, what if we started one? And so we, the first episode, we took a 6-pack of beer to my boss's apartment at the time in San Francisco and brought a couple microphones and talked about sales for an hour. And from there, it just kind of, the second episode was with my buddy's boss. And then from there, it's like it grew. And, the 20th episode, we had the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort on. We've had CEOs. We've had, Chris Voss. We've had, Olympic gold medalists even on in the early days. So it's been quite a journey, and have learned a lot doing it. But it really just all, I guess, stemmed from a curiosity and an ambitiousness to want to learn and grow and meet interesting people. And this was kind of my Trojan horse to get in to have some of those conversations.
I mean, that's fantastic. I did listen to the episode with Chris Voss, and I think Chris Voss is amazing. His book is obviously, I think, one of the best books out there, and everybody should read that book. But I think that's fantastic. One of the reasons why I started this podcast is kind of the same, right? You meet people you wouldn't have otherwise met, right? I wouldn't have met you had it not been for this podcast. So I think that's great. But what I want to understand a little more, Tom, over there is how did you? So it's they say that I'm sure you've heard of a word called pod fading, right? You start a podcast and there are so many podcasts with 4 or 5 episodes and that's it. But releasing 272 episodes, that's huge. I've released 3 episodes now, and I know what kind of effort that takes. Having a full-time job, how did you manage all of that, and how did you ensure that that stayed with you, that you remained persistent on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to two things for me. One is it's a matter of consistency for sure. So it's not, you don't get all 272 episodes out, in a day or in a week. It's taken about 4.5 years, and it's very rare that I miss a week. There have been a few instances, but for the most part, it's coming out once or twice a week, for 4 straight years, and so that consistency just compounds and adds up over time. And the second thing is a concept I've been thinking a lot about recently is about, managing or even manipulating time. And, when I started doing the podcast, oftentimes I would just spend all day Sunday, like editing podcasts and doing the footnotes and everything like that. And then over time, that got to be a little bit draining, working 6 full days a week. So I said, okay, how do I maybe maneuver this into my mornings, into my evenings? And so generally, I wake up early, I go to sleep early, and I spend time in the morning before my sales day begins, or after the sales day is over. Like right now, we're recording this at 5 p.m. my time. And so, 7 a.m. Or 5 p.m. are pretty good times for me to do the podcast. And I try to focus on the big rocks that are going to get the most important things done. And so hopefully I can do a really good sales job, and maybe it'll take someone 12 hours and I can do it in 8 or 9, and, try to do the podcast where I can do a really good job with the interview, with the prep work. And then, I don't focus as much on some of like the granular things like SEO for my website and, writing the best footnotes or whatever it might be. So I feel like I try to manipulate time and really just focus on what I think are the most important things that are going to push me forward, and really know that some things are going to fall through the cracks, and be kind of comfortable and make peace with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the concept of time manipulation. And I got a good sense, but can you give some examples of, let's say, outside this situation, how can anybody do the time manipulation? Can you give some more idea or throw some more light on that? Because that's not a concept that I've heard of a lot. So I would really like to know more, like if anybody has to use time manipulation, what would that look like?
Yeah, so let's break this down. So, a concept that I did not come up with this what I'm about to say, but I read it and it's really stuck with me is the concept of being a time billionaire. So, I'm 28. I don't know how old all of the listeners are, but if you're in your 30s or earlier, and if you live to have an average human lifespan, you're a time billionaire. You're going to live for at least 1 billion more seconds on average.
Right.
And when you think about a dollar billionaire like Warren Buffett, one of the richest people ever, he would trade his billions of dollars for billions more seconds, absolutely guaranteed, because he's like 95 and he's got all the money in the world, but he probably doesn't have that much time left on earth. And so time, I think we all know, is our most valuable asset. And so when I think about it, I know we all have 24 hours in a day. And I know that there's some people that seem to get so much done, and some people that get seemingly nothing done, or they just feel stuck. And so for me, I'm trying to evaluate, how can I warp time in my favor? So the first thing that I would do is, and I've done this, is to go through your day as you're going through it, and keep a little notepad next to you and write down, like, what are you actually doing every 15 to 30 minutes? And you kind of make little blocks. And I know you probably have your calendar in Gmail, but what you say you're going to do is not necessarily what you do, right? And so you write, okay, I'm eating breakfast. Okay, I'm on a sales call. I'm doing a podcast. Oh, I just spent 35 minutes scrolling Instagram. Or oh man, I just got caught in a Twitter political thread for 30 minutes. That put me off track, or whatever it might be. And you keep track of all those hours, and you do that for a few days. And you get a pretty good sense and a good awareness of where your time and energy are being spent. And so I think that's the first step. The second step is, all right, what in there should I be just trying to cut out, or can I delegate to other people? And so for me, earlier in my life, coming out of school, I was partying a lot, and I was going out, 4 or 5 nights a week and drinking and all this stuff. And I realized that not only was that killing all my time at night, but I'd wake up later, I'd have less energy in the morning. so on and so forth. So it's really like eating up hours and hours of my week. So that was one thing that for me, it was worthwhile to cut out. Um, and I found ways to try to delegate things. So I've hired someone that helps me to produce the podcast and do some of the editing, and that takes a couple hours back in my week. And so I think trying to first have the awareness, try to cut out any of the pieces that aren't particularly necessary, and then focus on of the where you want to be in the next 6 to 12 months. What are the few things that are going to get you there? If you want to produce a podcast, well, you need to have good podcast conversations. You probably need to do some prep. Those are probably the two most important things. If you want to sell a lot, well, you need to prospect and you need to have time to have customer conversations, but you don't need to be the best at Salesforce administration, or you don't need to be the best at doing some administrative tasks. And so for me, I try to think, what are the hours, my hot zones that I call them, where my brain's on fire. I'm working really great. Like I'm really focused. I'm locked in. For me, that's the morning. So I try to get my high priority items done before noon if I can. In the afternoon, because I'm up early, and we all only have a limited amount of like brain power in a day. That's usually when I'm doing more administrative stuff or responding to emails or getting meetings set up or things that don't require a lot of thought and focus and creativity. And so I think for me, I'd kind of break it down into those few things. Is like the awareness. You try to cut out or delegate what isn't critically important, and then try to match up the time of day to what you're doing. If it's a creative task, if it's a conversation with someone, just based on how you operate, and try to set up your schedule to manipulate it so you're kind of rigging the odds in your favor that you can get more done and be more productive.
Love it. I think that was great breakup of the system, right? So of this time manipulation. So I think basically, just to summarize there, uh, track your time, because you're so right. A lot of times we spend time like phone, and we'll come to phones later, but phone, or just maybe checking YouTube video, right? You think that you've spent 5 minutes, but in reality you've spent maybe 20 minutes, and those 15 minutes can help you get something out. So yeah, tracking that time, so crucial, and then cutting out the noise, as I would say, things that do not get you closer to your goals. And then the third thing, and I think this is the most important thing, but often most overlooked, is what are your high priority tasks. Um, I think you mentioned that if you are in sales, if you are prospecting is your high priority task. If you want to get a podcast out, having those conversations is a high priority task, and making time for that. So yeah, I think that's wonderful. In terms of executing this, what are the challenges that you face? I mean, sometimes tracking can be difficult. What are the kind of challenges that you might have faced when you tried to install this, or not install, sorry, tried to implement the system initially? And how did you manage to overcome those?
Yeah, I think two things have been my typical roadblock. So first is putting too much on my plate. So I would always recommend that people think big but act small, right? Rather than wanting to go from zero to a top podcast and a blog and this and that and a newsletter, and a top Instagram. Start with one thing. Let's okay. You're interested in a podcast. Try doing one every other week, right? Or once, maybe once a week. And then maybe you start to get more content out. And then maybe once you grow that, you start a newsletter. And maybe, once you have that down, then you start something else. But I think one issue that I have gotten into before is like I go from 0 to 100 too quick and burn myself out. And that's, I think a lot of ambitious people probably struggle with that. And the second piece is it's this life, this creating a disciplined, structured life is very helpful for productivity, but it's oftentimes can become at the expense of personal relationships. And so I know for me personally, I'm in a relationship, I'm engaged. I live with my fiance, and she and I work differently in a lot of ways. I like a more rigid schedule, and she's can be more spontaneous or more free flowing. I like to get up early typically. She sometimes works better at night. And so like we have some things that some ways that we have to work through that. But originally, I would be so dialed in, because if I was living alone or with just a random roommate, like my schedule is mine, and like I'll get up at 5 and I'll do A, B, and C, and I can dot my morning routine down to the minute. But that's not the same if you live with someone else, if you have a relationship, or I know, certainly not from experience, but I know when people say that they have children, that's just a whole nother
Oh yes.
ball of wax
Oh
as well.
yes.
Yeah, it sounds like you have experience with that. Um,
Absolutely.
so I think the structure, having a plan is so important, but not being too rigid and being able to be flexible is too. And that's a skill that I've had to learn more recently to maintain some balance in life.
Yeah, I mean, it is it's interesting, right? Like this discipline brings freedom, but there are these things, and I can completely relate to what you're saying. Uh, you have to be flexible around that, uh, and yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it needs to bring in some sort of happiness as well in the relationship, because doing anything at the expense of that happiness can become problematic. Um, the one thing that I do want to get in, and you mentioned two things. One in some in a little while back is getting more done in 6 to 8 hours compared to what people do in 11 to 12 hours. I think that's one point that I want to get into.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the key to that, I believe, is deep work, right? Like how do and we've all heard of the concept of deep work by now, but how do you manage to get into that zone that you're able to get the work done in the hours that is allocated, that those are allocated, and then move out and focus on this? How do you do that? What does that look like how do you get that work done in those time bound period?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things to it. In deep work, the book is staring right at me on my bookshelf, the bright yellow
Oh yes.
book by Cal
it's,
Newport,
a, it's
which
a
is
great
great.
book. It's amazing
It's
book. Yeah.
great. And I think I'm paraphrasing, but something that stood out to me from the book is he says like the way to be more productive is there's an equation of how much time you spend and how intensely you work. And so if you want to get more done in less time, then you need to focus on one thing at a time and do it, like intensely or with a lot of focus. And so the way I do that is a few ways. One is like I always have it prepped and scheduled. So like I was saying before, I know what the key things I need to do are tomorrow. So before I hang up the phone and shut down the laptop tonight, I know what's on the schedule tomorrow, and I know the few big things that I need to get done in the key hours for me. They're on the calendar. No one's bothering me on Slack or anything like that. So that's the first step. I think the second step is trying to simplify it. So instead of looking at a to-do list of 27 things, I try to pick one thing in each of what I call like life buckets. So I've got like my podcast bucket, I've got my sales bucket, I've got my health and fitness bucket, I've got my relationship bucket, and I've got my like learning bucket. So I've got to get one thing done in each of those for me to like consider the day a win. And so that might mean, all right, I need to spend an hour prospecting for new business. Okay, that's on my calendar, 8 to 9 a.m. tomorrow. Like when I get to that time, when it goes from 7:59 to 8, I'm there. I'm in my, email or LinkedIn or whatever I'm doing. My Slack notifications are off. My phone is, face down or, not next to me. And like, I've got some music playing and I'm doing that thing right there. And then, I'm going to go and do my one thing that needs to get done for the podcast or for whatever it might be. So I think sometimes, we have so long of to-do lists because we want to get everything done and we want to be quote unquote productive. But if you're just dealing with all these small pebbles all day, you're really not getting anything done. So I find the way to do the deep work is you choose less things, You give yourself time. You block other people out of the equation by blocking off your calendar, turning off your notifications. And then it's just like there's just a work of like actual discipline where it's like, all right, you got to get your butt in the seat and you got to write, or you got to make cold calls, or you got to prospect for podcast guests. And that part is more of just like actually having the discipline to do the hard thing in the moment versus whatever the more fun thing, which would be like scrolling Instagram. And so that just I think is more of like a mind over matter type of thing.
Yeah. And I think and for listeners, if you don't take anything away from this conversation, just take two things: the book Deep Work, and the other book that I'm reading, Tom, recently is Essentialism. I think if you combine these two books, those two, and implement that, I think that can transform your life dramatically. You mentioned about focusing on the right things, like, take everything out of your to do list, just focus on the key tasks, and do it intently or intensely rather. And I think that's super critical, but it's not easy to get there. It takes time. I'm glad. Uh, I'm glad that you were able to find that spot. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Now, one question that I've been having, and I'm sure a lot of listeners would have. There have a lot of been. I mean, I've just released 3 episodes, right, on my podcast. I've been doing blog writing for a while now. There are a lot of times when the work gets stressful, and I want to give up on those other things.
Mhm.
Like, should I even do this? There's so much stress in my work. The work extends, and those are the testing times. How do you manage to? I'm sure you must have faced many of those occasions as well. How do you manage to pull back up and keep on with what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, you have to expect we're all humans here. So, again, like that, I think that's one of the reasons for flexibility. If you're too rigid, yeah, you can map out the perfect day, the perfect week. Here's how I'm going to manipulate time. Here are my big things I'm going to do. I'm going to cut out all the small things. I'm going to get off social media. You could have the greatest plans in the world, but then what happens if there's a family emergency, right? What happens if you get laid off? What happens if your boss gets laid off and they have a new boss? If you're moving, if something happens with your kid, your dog, like there's a million things in life that happen that disrupt all the plans that we make. And so I think for me, it certainly depends on what the circumstance is. Like there's some occasions where, hey, look, like, for me, family is more important than work or any of the productivity stuff that we're talking about. And so, if a family emergency pops up, I'm on a plane, I'm going to see whatever's going on. And if I have to miss a podcast that week, then that's well worth the trade off. I think that's worth noting. But I think if we're talking just general life stress, where there's busy work and things that happen and busy schedules that we're all dealing with, I think it's just important to focus on trying to get like one small thing done, and understand that like one is better than zero. And so let's say that you had all these ambitions to do a million things for your podcast this week, but you only got one done. Well, you know what? You did one, right? And like you can keep a little momentum from that. And maybe next week you can get a little bit more done. And I think it goes in ebbs and flows. So I think it's kind of a mindset shift to like take the perfectionism away a little bit, understand that some weeks are going to be great. When you're feeling great and you feel like you got all the time in the world, then double down on it and like keep kicking ass. And when there's weeks where it's like you're up to your eyeballs in work or family stuff, well, you might just not get certain things done, and that's okay too. And I think it's looking at this productivity and your career as just this long marathon, and you're not going to be perfect and you can't sprint through the whole thing. And so I think it's just important to be mindful of that, and try to work this within all of the other life circumstances that you have, and try to make it work as well as you can on a day-to-day and on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I love that advice on just do one small thing. And of course, if it's a bigger emergency, you obviously have to leave everything and attend to that, and it's well worth. I mean, it's important to do that. But let's say you have those regular stress that I was talking about. maybe just do one small thing, but do it, or do just keep one small thing, and keep the momentum low, but don't let it go away, and be flexible about it. I think I love that advice. So that's great. Uh, we'll come to your system now. You've kind of touched upon it, but let's take your day. How do you begin? What is the kind of discipline that you have? And I'm sure you must have had to structure a day to get all of these elements together: your work, your podcast. What does that structure look like, and what does that system look like?
Yeah, the listeners already know that the day, tomorrow starts the night before. So the day always starts the night before. So let's just keep that in check. Like, I've got my schedule set. Um, I got the clothes that I'm going to wear laid out. I've got my coffee in the brewer ready to go. Like, I got some things dialed in the night before. So I think that's just important to mention. But a typical day, and, like all of us, we're days are different, but I'm up in the ballpark of like 5:30 in the morning. I mean, I get up and I kind of handle my business, brush my teeth and whatnot, and have some water. I like to spend a little bit of time in the morning doing a meditation and prayer. So I probably spend 10 to 15 minutes doing that. And have some water and get my coffee going. And it's pretty early in the morning. And like I mentioned, that is just happens to be the time that I get the most like brain power. And so most of like my creative work that I'm doing, whether it's writing, whether it's prepping for the podcast, whether it's something sales related, like all of that is usually getting done before noon. So I might spend, let's say, like the hours of 7 to 9 or 6 to 8 even, working on side hustle stuff. So that could be writing a blog, that could be prepping a podcast, it could be having a podcast conversation. But it's generally like I'm paying myself first. I'm trying to get some of that done. And then, 8 o'clock comes around, and that's usually when I'm getting after my sales territory. So I'll have an hour for, usually the big thing that I like to do in the morning is to prospect, because I think that's the lifeblood of any salesperson. And that's like the one thing that I need to do. So I'll do that. I'll generally have like a smoothie or oatmeal or something like that. That's, fairly light, but I do eat in the morning. There's whatever other top items I need to get done before noon, have lunch. And then, like I said, in the afternoon is typically when I'm doing more low priority stuff, emails, doing admin work, setting stuff up, doing prep, things like that. And then I might have a podcast like we're doing right now. That's usually at like 5, not every day. And then usually in like around the 5 o'clock time is when I'll get a workout in. So I love to run. Sometimes I'll do like a CrossFit type workout, or I'll play tennis, but usually I'm doing that. I'm done with that at like 6-ish, 6:30. And then have, make dinner with my fiance and kind of chill out for the night. And then, the last thing I'll do for the night is, make sure I'm prepped up mentally for the day ahead, and get to bed like, I don't know, somewhere in the ballpark of 10. And that's a typical day. Nothing's ever perfect. It's always different,
Yes,
especially, from being in sales.
absolutely.
Some days you have 12 Zoom meetings, and some days you have 2. But that's like as close to an average day as I guess I could say.
No, that's perfect. I was listening to this podcast, Tom, which says that the tough things that you want to do, like habits that are difficult to follow, you should do in the first 8-9 hours after waking up. It's because he talks about limbic friction is minimum at that point in time. So I think that's where you mentioned you kind of heavy front load your first half with those kind of activities. Yeah, and that sounds great. Now, in this structure, and in your work, what are the kind of tools do you use? I mean, are you heavy on tools, or you use those basic stuff? Like, are there any tools that you use to keep yourself on in check, on track?
I sometimes aspire to be better at using tools, but I feel like I always kind of go back to fundamentals. I'm a big notebook, like pen and paper type person. for calendar, I just use my Gmail calendar to block things off. I do block websites on my laptop, so I cannot go to visit social media websites outside of LinkedIn on my laptop. It'll get blocked. I think it's just called the site blocksite.com. And so I can't go on Facebook or anything. I'll delete apps from my phone. So if I feel like I'm going on Instagram too much, I'll just delete it, and it just kind of like remove the temptation for me. I'm trying to think in terms of productivity though. I mean, I feel like this is like the least sexy answer ever, but I pretty much stick to my calendar, and I stick to my pen and paper for the most part. Oh, and
No,
so and one that I use a lot is Evernote. So when I have notes on a bunch of different, I think we all have this, like ideas pop into our head while we're doing something, and it's about
absolutely.
a
Yep.
completely different topic. And so I have like a bunch of different threads in Evernote that I keep for ideas of a blog to write or a podcast or a sales idea. And it's like, all right, I don't have time for this, but could be a good idea. I'm going to put it in there and then come back to it later. So I guess that's one.
Yep. And you know, the ideas come at the weirdest times, right? I was listening, I heard about one tool that they have that you keep it in your shower and you have ideas and you can jot down things over there. So, yes, I can completely relate to that. And I think you mentioned that I think we've kind of sometimes the tools get overwhelming as well. So, I mean, it's great to kind of keep it simple. Have a pen and paper, a calendar. You know, sometimes calendars are so powerful we don't use them fully. Um, and those blocking sites, I think sometimes you feel that, you know, why do you need that blocking? But it's so powerful that you do need tools like these. I mean, I have one on my phone as well to block. Like I cannot do anything. Like there's an app called Forest app. But yeah, those were great. We're going to dive into some fun questions, or interesting questions. Tom,
Let's do it.
let me ask you the first one. What is your relationship with your phone?
No one has ever asked me that question. It's such a great question. Um, I think it depends. Let's probably all be honest. I think sometimes the question is, are you using the phone or is the phone using you?
Yes.
And I feel a little bit like more in the power seat right as of today. But if you ask me in November, man, I was off the rail. Like I was using social media too much, email. I was always looking for a notification, or I was always looking for a quick hit of like information. And so I actually gave up all social media in December. And it kind of like cleared me out, and now I check it a little bit, but it's a lot more healthy. So I'd say it's I try to be mindful with it. I know that there's people way smarter than I am that are trying to get me hooked on it. And I always like to think of, you know, of really the thought of like, am I using this app or is this app using me? And I think just that awareness helps to kind of bring it in context of, okay, it's not bad to go on Instagram for 5-10 minutes, but it's probably not great to be like going down a doom scrolling thing around some topic. So I think the awareness is where at least I'm trying to be right now.
Great. The second question. What is that one decision that you took in the last 6 months, or it could be a year as well, that that's not completely, but that really changed the game for you in terms of being able to manage your time and focus?
The best thing I've done in the last 6 to 12 months to bring back my focus, I think, could I say two?
Yeah, you can say two or three. Don't worry.
Okay. So one is this is gonna sound weird. It's going on walks.
Hmm.
And maybe this goes back to the relationship with the phone, but I feel you know, as a salesperson, I'm on my laptop all day long on Zoom calls, on email. And then when I do podcasts and then when I write, it's just all on the laptop or the phone. And I find working from home, I don't spend that much time, you know, not by my devices. So I try to take a walk every day, maybe like during lunch. I'll eat lunch and then I'll take sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 30 minutes. But it's not the walk necessarily that is helping me focus, although that's a great place to come up with ideas if you get away from your phone and you take a walk in nature. But when I come back for the afternoon, I feel like I got like a little bit of like an espresso shot. Like I feel like I got some more energy without having the actual espresso shot. So for me, take the 30 minutes for myself. No podcast, no music, no phone call. Just like try to walk and just like let my brain kind of like catch up on the day. Has been big for me. And then the other thing is like, this is not about focus at all, but it goes back to the conversation around it's really hard to focus on work when there's other big things going on in your world and in your life and in your personal life. And so in the last 18 months, I've been going to therapy either once a week or once every other week. And like that's the first thing that came to my mind when you asked that. That's been the biggest like life improvement, which then goes into
Hmm.
work improvement, has been doing that. So I know that some people that I'm friends with, they say it's life changing. Others, it's not for them. So I'm not here to say that everyone should do it, but for me, it's been absolutely life changing.
Thank you so much. The walks, I think, I'm going to try that. I started that, but just being without, I mean, I'm like, okay, let me listen to a podcast. But I think there's so much value in just not being with any of those, just being with yourself and taking a walk, or I mean, and being comfortable with those thoughts that come. I think that's something that I'm going to take away from this. So thank you. Third question: what is it that you do that a lot of people around you don't do when it comes to focus? I mean, is there anything of that sort that you think that you do, but a lot of people around you probably don't do as much?
I mean, I feel like half of the stuff that we talked about, if you let's go back to the example I gave you about marking down how you actually spend time, not how you think you do, not what your calendar looks like, but how you actually spend time. And do you actually spend multiple hours every day on the few things that actually make a difference in your life and your success and in the money you make or whatever's you're striving for? Um, I truly don't think most people do that. I think a lot of us wake up with good intentions, um, and we start the day off, and some we might feel positive, we might feel negative, and we get to start work, and an email comes in or a Slack comes in, and there goes the next 4 hours because then you just spiral into this like reactive mode, and so I really don't think that. I think 5% of people probably really spend the majority of their time in like a proactive mode and getting a lot done. And I think that's what makes the people that manipulate time so successful over the long run.
Yep, and I would, by the way, completely agree with you on that piece. I don't think a lot of people do that. So yeah, this has been great, Tom. Is there any question that you think I should have asked but I haven't asked in the conversation?
No, but I want to ask you that one about the 6 to 12 months. What's the thing that you've picked up that has been the biggest impact?
I think tracking, just not just tracking my time, but tracking my habits. Um, and it's been amazing. In fact, I've been tracking. I have a Excel sheet for every month. It's old school, right? But I have a spreadsheet where I'm every day writing down that, okay, I did this, I did this. I tried tools, by the way, it didn't work out. So I went back to spreadsheet and I tracked those habits. And that's been great. So last 1 month, what I did was, I work with an accountability partner, and I said that, okay, you know what, these are the three key habits that I want to establish. And if I don't do this 5 times a week, like let's say, one of those is writing one page. If I don't do that 5 times a week, I'm going to pay you X amount of money. And we do that now. So, that has somehow magically, and the money is, I would say it's like gold. It's not too little, it's not too much, but it's enough for me to pinch. It's enough for it to pinch me. So, and that has been amazing. The kind of it makes you remember that you still need to do your task for that day, which wasn't there earlier. So, anyways, long answer, but yeah, I think tracking my habits, and now this has been really good for me.
I love that. I love the money idea of like having some skin in the game, even if it's only, I don't know how much you're doing, but even if it's like $10 or $5, like that's enough for me
Yeah.
to be like, I'm going to write that page.
Yep. And I mean, I see the thing is you have to look at it long term, right? Let's say if you write every day, think about the value that you're going to get compared to that money that you spend. And that should be the thing that, you are putting that money on the line for to get what you to stick to make an habit stick. Because these are difficult habits, by the way. So yeah, no, but thanks for asking that question, and thank you so much. Last thing, where can people find you? Where do they listen to your podcast? If you just want to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I run the Millennial Sales podcast. So if you're in sales, the podcast is all focused on helping young salespeople in their career. So it's once or twice a week that I will have someone on that's CEO, a VP of sales, someone that's been successful, sharing the ups and downs, the struggles that they've had, and how they've found their way to success to hopefully inspire and educate you. So that's Millennial Sales, wherever you listen to podcasts or if you watch YouTube. And then the other best place is probably just LinkedIn. Tom Alemo, I'm post every single day on sales and mindset and productivity and things like that. So give me a holler. Let me know what you thought of the podcast, and would love to connect with you.
Yep. Thank you so much, and do listen to that podcast. I mean, I told Tom there was some episodes were amazing, and yeah, the content on LinkedIn is great. So Tom, thank you so much for spending this time with me and talking about your system and how did you bring back your focus. But yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much.
I love it. This is a great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks.